In today's video, we're going to visit the new 7 wonders of the world. These monumental structures are rich in history and have stood the test of time. This international list consists of Machu Picchu in Peru, the Taj Mahal in India, Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro, Petra in Jordan, the Colosseum in Rome, Chichen Itza in Mexico, and the Great Wall of China. On top of this incredible list, we can't forget our all-time favorite, the Great Pyramids of Giza. This memorable structure will always hold a special place in our hearts. And to think that these most renowned pyramids still have some secrets hiding in the dark, when could we ever get a hold of them? Not only that, but there are a bunch of conspiracies circulating the world explaining that these pyramids were structures gifted by some aliens. Is this the truth? Well, tune in because you're about to find out some crazy truths about these incredibly beautiful places. Let's hop on a ride and first visit the very first mysterious Machu Picchu. A secret city with 300 to 1,000 residents formerly stood in the Andes Mountains of Peru, 2,400 meters above sea level, in a spectacular natural setting. Machu Picchu is a historical landmark of the Incan Empire. It once stood with pride as the largest empire in America back in its prime. The remains of the city, which were the only things left back when it was constructed in the first half of the 15th century, exhibit the Inca civilization's talent for architecture. The remnants of the city make up around 200 buildings that were fully constructed of exquisitely carved granite stones and assembled without the use of mortar. Not even a piece of paper can be inserted between them because of how precisely they were installed. And as a result, the buildings were much more earthquake resistant too. The stone walls may tremble during an earthquake but can remain strong and manage to hold themselves together without falling. This building technique is perhaps the reason why the majority of the structures at Machu Picchu are still intact today, regardless of Peru's regular seismic activities. However, why was this city abandoned after being built in such a remote area? According to many researchers, the city was created as an aristocratic retreat and a royal estate for the Inca emperor. Others, however, contend that it was the ideal hiding place to shelter the emperor in the event of an outside assault. It might have also served as a place of worship to respect the surrounding mountains, which the Incas revered as sacred. This would also explain why there are several temples at Machu Picchu, namely the magnificent Temple of the Sun, which was constructed with extreme care and the finest workmanship. Despite all of these, it is still unknown what motivated the construction of Machu Picchu, but it is known that people did not live there for a very long time. And less than a century after Machu Picchu was constructed, the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire began in 1528. Eventually, the inhabitants of Machu Picchu left the city because of the fear of looting and devastation. They also destroyed the nearby woodlands with fire to prevent any new routes from emerging up the mountain and to defend the city. This plan worked well and the Spanish invaders failed to even discover the city. A large number of the larger Inca cities were destroyed following the Spanish victory in 1572. Vilcabamba, the final Inca city to succumb to the Spanish, was among them, but Machu Picchu remained unknown since there was no record of it in writing and no obvious route to get to it. Later on, Hiram Bingham, an American explorer and historian, conducted a small expedition to Cusco more than 3 centuries later in the hopes of finding the lost city of Vilcabamba. The explorers inquired about nearby ancient sites when they arrived at a tiny village outside of Cusco. On July 24, 1911, the explorers drove mules down the routes to the vast ruins that the farmer had informed them about. Bingham soon concluded that these remains were Vilcabamba, the lost city. However, this was not the case and the area came to be known as Machu Picchu. More than a century after its discovery, Machu Picchu is still one of the most revered and noteworthy locations on Earth. Up next, why don't we go back just a couple of millennia in the past to feast on the majestic ancient Egypt, one of history's most developed civilizations. Humanity continues to be in awe of their culture and accomplishments in practically every aspect of life, including arithmetic, language, medicine, and architecture. The Great Pyramid of Giza, one of their finest creations, is still standing and continues to astound visitors from all over the world. The height of this enormous tower, which was said to be constructed in just 27 years, was 146.5 meters. It was made up of 2.3 million blocks, each of them weighing about the same as an SUV. How far ahead of their time they were is proven by the fact that some people still think it was constructed by aliens. When it was constructed, the Great Pyramid also had a very distinctive look due to the polished white limestone that covered it. The pyramid's inner structure was hidden by this dazzling exterior, which made it sparkle in the blistering heat. A gold-plated capstone was used to cover the pyramid's tip, giving it a stunning appearance that can be seen for miles in all directions. As the years go by, the gleaming casing stones gradually became loose and were taken out to construct other monuments, like the Cairo Citadel and mosques throughout the capital. Because of this, the Great Pyramid of Giza is currently 8 meters shorter at 138.5 meters. However, the question still remains: how did the Egyptians accomplish such a great feat? How could they dig, move, and set these enormous stones despite the lack of advanced equipment? The majority of the blocks were extracted from quarries in the central field, which is close to the pyramid. It's assumed that they pulled the blocks through the sand on wooden sleds. Moreover, as they were pulled through the scorching sand, they sank into the ground, rendering any progress extremely challenging. To deal with this predicament, wetting the sand beforehand worked well for the situation. This process made it considerably simpler to transfer the large blocks to the construction site, since the friction was lessened and the sand was made firmer. The white limestones for the pyramid's casing, however, had to be shipped by water from Tura, about 10 kilometers to the south. Researchers discovered that over 8,000 tons of granite stones originated in Aswan, which was situated about 900 kilometers south of the Nile. This is quite astounding. Over the years, scientists have developed a wide range of theories. The majority of hypotheses center on the utilization of ramps. Ramps were believed to be the sole practical technique for moving the enormous stone blocks toward the summit of the pyramid in the absence of cranes and other contemporary construction tools. The first hypothesis claims that the Egyptians built the pyramid with a single straight ramp that was raised as they went along. A maximum incline of roughly 8% is required for such a ramp, otherwise dragging the stones up would be too challenging. But that would mean that the ramp would go as far as 1.8 kilometers long. It would have been a huge undertaking, perhaps even tougher than building the pyramid itself, to construct such a ramp. A ramp going around the perimeter of the pyramid and up to the top would be a second, more effective method. The drawback of such a ramp, however, is that the corners wouldn't be finished until the ramp was completely built. Due to this, it is highly challenging to accurately measure the angles at the corners and nearly impossible to guarantee that the corners are straight and completely meet at the tip. The current explanations didn't satisfy French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, and in 2003 he put out a different idea. After almost 7 years of study and the development of these 3D models, he concluded that only 1/3 of the pyramid could be built using an exterior ramp. They may have employed internal ramps that spiral upward toward the top throughout the building. This would result in a significantly smaller ramp for the first third and make it simpler to line up the corners. Furthermore, this theory is supported by evidence. The Great Pyramid of Giza was examined in the 1980s using microgravimetry, a technique that quantifies an object's density. They were looking for hidden chambers at the time but were unsuccessful. But according to one of their images, the internal ramp idea might account for this reduced density spiraling around the pyramid. What you can see are the pyramid's lower density parts. This could be a clue that the pyramid was constructed via tunnels. Sadly, no tunnel entrances have yet been found, making it impossible to explore these clues in greater detail. In addition to the issue of how it was made, there is an intriguing fact regarding who constructed the pyramids. A common misconception that was first advanced by the Greek historian Herodotus states that slaves were used to construct the Great Pyramid. However, numerous investigations have demonstrated that this is probably not the case. The ruins of villages created specifically for the thousands of laborers who likely traveled from far settlements along the Nile River in quest of work have been found by archaeologists. In 2010, Egypt unveiled recently found tombs, including 12 skeletons of pyramid builders, further disproving the slave notion. The wonderfully preserved skeletons were interred alongside jars that had once held beer and bread intended for the workers' afterlife. The fact that the Egyptians performed identical ceremonies for the kings and elites demonstrates how highly the workers were valued. And maybe we'll just never know. The fact that ancient Egypt was able to complete this undertaking in just 27 years, however, proves what a great and accomplished civilization they were. For the last wonder that we'll visit in this video, let's head over to the Great Wall of China. One of the earliest civilizations in human history originated in China. Paper and gunpowder are just two of the revolutionary technologies attributed to early Chinese culture. They also erected the longest man-made edifice to date. The Great Wall of China spans more than 400 towns in northern and central China and is 21,000 kilometers long overall. Contrary to popular belief, it is not one continuous structure. In reality, it is a collection of bulwarks and fortifications whose construction began between the 8th and 5th centuries BC. China was then split up into several smaller states that were always at war with one another over territory. The rulers of these minor republics began erecting huge walls to deter invaders as a result of the constant external threats. By the 3rd century BC, the warring nations had united under the rule of the Qin dynasty, whose emperor began work on extending and uniting some of the wall's existing portions. However, the most well-known portions of the wall were constructed much later in the 14th century during the Ming dynasty, which took control of some 1,700 years later. To defend against the Mongol tribes, over a third of the wall as well as some of its strongest parts were constructed at that time. Depending on the type of terrain the wall traversed and the materials accessible nearby, the materials used to build the Great Wall vary widely. While the strongest portions of the wall were constructed using marble, bricks, and a special element that has been preserved for so many centuries, other areas of the wall were constructed using ram, dirt, and wood. The key component is sticky rice found in a peculiar mortar. It was first used during the Ming era and proved to be just as durable and waterproof as cement. It also tightly sealed the bricks, preventing weeds from growing in the spaces between them. Even after severe weather and earthquakes, many Ming-era structures are still standing strong today. But it wasn't simple to construct the longest man-made structure. Huge bricks and stones frequently needed to be hauled through challenging terrain and to mountain tops. Without what we know now as modern technology, laborers were limited to using just their bare hands and would frequently travel great distances, which led to their demise from hunger and tiredness. Because of this, a great number of workers perished while building the wall. Only estimated guesses can be made at this time, and some papers claim that there have been about 400,000 deaths. The fact that the Great Wall of China has withstood the test of time and continues to draw more than 10 million tourists each year is a monument to the skill and diligence of the millions of laborers who built it. But in the future, this might also be a concern. The wall has been preserved in parts because of inventive mortar techniques and stone blocks, but not all of its sections have been as well cared for. Unpleasant weather throughout the years caused around 1/3 of the wall to disintegrate. The wall has deteriorated as a result of human activity, including villagers stealing construction supplies and too many tourists. Even though parts of its sections have vanished, the wall's enormous scale has given rise to numerous conspiracies, such as the one that can be seen from the moon. However, this myth is not true. In the 1930s, no one had ever been to the moon or even to space when they claimed that it could be seen from the moon. Neil Armstrong, the first person to walk on the moon, was frequently questioned about seeing the Great Wall from there, but he could only see continents, lakes, and other bodies of water. Would you like a second episode featuring the interesting tales of the world's other wonders? Subscribe and tell us in the comments section below if you'd like to. See you next time.